Hello everybody and welcome back. Now first things first, small apology for totally screwing up the last video where I misidentified the weapon that was being used on the Friedrich the Gross. The whole 406, 420 millimeter thing kind of messed it up. I was just in a really bad state that day, so apologize for that. But instead of just sort of letting it go at that, I decided to actually go test these things and figure out which of these weapons are better. Now, in terms of anything that's giving you a broadside, both weapons are very capable of penetrating and doing some pretty darn good damage. One of the things I do hear is that the 406s have an edge in terms of shell speed, I guess. So they're flatter, they're easier to hit at distance with. So I went ahead and tested it at close range, pretty much no difference between two weapons. Even at mid-range, not much distance here. You'll see that both of these weapons here, 406 on the left, 420 on the right, locked onto a battleship at the same distance, fire, take a look. The shells visually might be different, but in terms of actually getting to target and hitting, penetrating and doing damage, pretty much the same against broadside targets. In fact, I didn't really notice all that much of a difference through the majority of my tests in terms of sort of penetration or how often I'll get certain kind of hits. They all seemed very, very similar. The only real difference I felt was the difference between rate of fire for the 406mm guns and the alpha damage of the 420s. As you can see, in terms of shell travel speed, it's pretty much the same. I think the 406s are a teeny little bit faster. At even greater ranges, again, you'll notice the same thing. It's like you fire, the shells go out. By the time they actually get to target, it's pretty much identical. So there we go, guns fired, shells heading out. And just waiting for them to actually reach the target here. And take a look. See? Pretty much around the same time hitting a target at distance. So no major differences when it comes to how quickly your shells get to target. And the arc being relatively flat and not really all that different. I think at the beginning the 406s might be a tiny bit flatter, but again, doesn't really make a difference when the shells actually get to target. They all pretty much reach there at exactly the same time. Now, here we go. We're going to test sort of the penetration. Close range, Moskva, bow on. I'm going to fire with the 406s first. And you'll notice that I get my penetrations. And this is going to be true for the 406s and the 420s. Like, both weapons will penetrate cruiser bows, no problems. Both of them right now will bounce off of angled battleship bows. It's like, the weapons, the difference in terms of overmatch is so small that really it doesn't make a huge difference. Yes, and occasionally both weapons will do that crazy salvo when nothing hits. And then of course you'll have the nicer salvos where you will end up getting citadels through the bow. And again, doesn't really seem to matter which of the two I use. The big difference, of course, again, is what I mentioned earlier, in terms of damage and in terms of I guess, rate of fire. The 420s, they hit harder, right? So you always get that sort of reinforcing feeling that like when you do hit something, you do more damage. It's like, because the shells themselves individually, when they do pen, they do a little bit more. So it might just be one of those feeling kind of things, right? You fire, the shells hit, and you go, whoa, okay, that was a nice chunk of damage. Where if you were using like the 406s, even if you pen, sometimes you get kind of iffy damage, maybe. And that's a maybe too, because a lot of times how the damage sort of works out really depends on dispersion, whether you have a nice one or not so nice one. Like here I have a better dispersion than I had with the 406s. Got that citadel, did like 22k damage. Now looking at shooting at this sort of angled side armor of a Zal with the 406s, and sometimes I get that where I'm just getting all bounces, and that's auto bounce. It's not like the armor is so thick it's bouncing my shells. Okay, crappy dispersion every once in a while, that happens too. And sometimes with the 406s against an angled Zal, I get a lucky shot somewhere, it goes into Citadel, I get a Citadel hit. But in a lot of cases, I might just be getting nothing. And this has a lot to do with, I think, how the way the auto bounce mechanic is. It's like, as long as I don't overmatch a section of the armor, I very easily could just get auto bounced. Now here, the auto bounce didn't really work for the Zal against the 420, so I actually got lucky, and I did that with the 406s too. But yeah, I'll have those salvos where I get lucky and boom, into Citadel. Maybe you get penetration here and there, but there you go. With the 420s, sometimes I fire and I get nothing, or I get very little. Like I got one shell to go there. And in this one, I think I'm going to get a superstructure pen from that one on top. There you go, I got one superstructure pen there. So, with the 406s and the 420s, at close range, a lot of that, whether or not you pen and do damage or you get citadels, is kind of dependent on whether or not auto bounce works in your favor against you. The one time that I thought, okay, I think the 420s have an advantage over the 406s was actually at range. When I was dealing with sort of longer range shooting, I felt like when I did hit, the 420s had a slightly better chance to actually pen. While the 406s, sometimes you can hit something at range and it doesn't really work. But again, we're dealing a lot with RNG, and we're dealing with that sense of just, am I getting the auto bounce to go? Am I actually getting through? And I'm dealing directly with the armor, in terms of pen value versus armor. And sometimes a lot of that is just kind of random, unfortunately. I mean, as you can see against this angled Iowa with the 406s, in these last couple of shots, I've actually done a decent amount of damage. Actually, damage was quite consistent. But then you'll see that when I switch over, and there we go, got a salvo that did like nothing. Switch over to the 420s at that same angled Iowa at range, and you'll see that a lot of it just depends on whether or not I get lucky with auto bounce, whether or not I get past it, and sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, right? So like there, I didn't. Next salvo. Some of these are going to end up being kind of lucky, some of them not so much. It just depends. And here we go. This one hits. There we go. Got like 9,000 damage. Okay, get another salvo out there. So, anyways, I mean, while this test is continuing to run in the background, and in case anything significant happens, I'll make sure to let you know. In most cases, I didn't feel like there was that noticeable of a difference. So, really what the 406 versus 420 sort of debate comes down to is whether or not you prefer rate of fire or whether or not you prefer higher alpha, right? And the higher alpha, you have to think about it like this. Basically, every time you fire, let's say, 7 salvos, somebody with the 406s has fired 8 salvos. They're going to be able to get that extra salvo off in the same time it takes you to fire 7. So in terms of like damage difference between all that, the 406s have an edge. See, there I was bouncing a lot of my shells. In fact, here we go. These are actually penetration curves, and these penetration curves are pretty accurate. I've used other penetration curves generated with the same formula before. They were quite accurate. And you'll notice that, in fact, the 406s have higher penetration at close range, while the 420s actually have better penetration at long range. See where the red line is? At around 1.2, which is actually 12 kilometers. You'll notice that they're about the same, and once you move on to 1.6, which is around 16 kilometers, you notice that the 420s actually have better pen than the 406s. So that's something for you guys to keep in mind, that when you are deciding to use the 406s versus 420, pick what kind of scenario suits you. I mean, if you're actually trying to get in there and do a little bit of brawling, I would actually say in that kind of scenario, the 406s might actually have an edge. They have better pen numbers, overmatch is pretty much the same against the things that you're going to fight, and faster rate of fire is probably going to help. Although, I'm not discounting the fact that with the 420s, you could potentially hit that little bit harder per shell, and potentially do quite a bit more damage in those close range fights, but at the cost of a slow reload. So that's something you really do have to take into consideration. Anyways, folks, let me know what you think. Let me know what your in-game experiences with these two gun sets have shown you. Let me know in the comment section below. But I mean, the numbers are here, and I have tested it, and I do think that it really is down to your personal preference. Anyways, folks, I hope you enjoyed this video. Take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to all of you again really, really soon.